So I am here with our Assistant Dean of Chinese Ministries for Instant Global Bible College. And as you have read the article about the model minority myth of American culture, we thought it would be great to have Brother Ricky Poon share with us some of the things that we may not know about the Asian community and how even this virus is affecting them in adverse ways. So Ricky, let me ask you, the Asian Americans are experiencing, it seems, an improper reaction to the COVID-19. Who does this include in this reaction?
Thank you, Vince, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this very important subject. Well, the simple answer is that anyone who looks Asian, like me, can be a target for verbal or even physical abuse. So recent reports that I've read, not only Chinese Americans, but also Korean, Filipino, and others, have come under these types of attacks. And there are about 22 million Asian or Asian Americans in this country. Of course, most of them are concentrated in the metropolitan centers of the country. For me, I live in Eugene, Oregon, where there may be 5% Asian population. So in a way that's good, in a way that's bad, because people like me stand out a lot more when we go out. And really, even from my own personal experience, in the early stages of this pandemic, both my wife and I have experienced episodes of what I would call, microaggression, whether it's dirty looks or someone aping my Chinese language, or in the case of my wife, being, told to go back to where you came from in a supermarket parking lot. So it does happen.
Okay.
And we haven't been out and about since in Oregon. We still are under a stay-home order by the governor, like many of us. But as reopening gradually takes place, it is sad to say, well, the Asian Americans have to be mentally prepared when they venture out. It's just that's the way the world is.
Okay. So do Asians and Asian Americans feel caught off guard by this? What's been the response? Because I know obviously we've had a history in the past with this as a country, but have they been caught off guard by this response?
Well, the answer to that question, it depends. It depends. Different segments of the Asian or Asian American population, and even where they live, can affect how they're impacted. For example, if you are an older first generation immigrant, you may stay mostly within your own community and you don't go out as much, and perhaps you're not paying a whole lot of attention to what's going on in the national media. For those people, perhaps what's happening may not have that big of a significance. For me, I immigrated to this country as a teenager, and the high school that I attended in Seattle had about an 80% non-white population, very, very diverse. And even among the white students, there are a fairly large number of people with Jewish heritage. And a lot of my closest high school friends were children of Japanese Americans that had to be relocated to these, relocation camps during World War II. So because of that experience, and because I came of age during the civil rights and Vietnam War era, so I'm not surprised at what's happening now because of that early exposure to these kinds of things.
Right.
Really, when you come to think of it, Vince, there's always been an undercurrent of racism in
Yes.
this country.
Yes.
So, you mentioned some of these, events in the past, events like the very serious economic depression after the gold rush in the 1800s, or the Pearl Harbor, after Pearl Harbor,
Right.
World War II, and the current pandemic. Those events tend to intensify, racist attitudes that's, it's always been there,
Yeah.
and those events just kind of bring them, up into the surface. It's like being stirred up, kind of a thing.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Not a surprise at all.
Okay. Okay.
But for the younger generation of Asian Americans, and you mentioned that they may have grown up under the aura of the model minority myth. And in speaking to some of them, they are kind of puzzled. How do you how do you go from being a model minority back to being the yellow hero
Right. Right.
in such a short, you're
Right.
talking about weeks and months, right?
Yes.
With this
Yes.
pandemic, and so
Wow.
and they're very unsettled, and
Yeah.
they feel displaced, in a situation like this. So for me, when my children, son and daughter, were in their teenage years, we have spent 5 years in southeast Idaho, in Idaho Falls. Not a very diverse community.
Right. Right. Right.
There might have been 200 Chinese people in a population of over 50,000.
Wow.
But being there, I made a point to take my children to even, little towns, old mining towns in central North Idaho, where actually historically there had been Chinese presence in those little places. I've taken them to the relocation camp in southern Idaho and Minidoka, where the Japanese Americans were interned, and also a memorable visit. The family drove from Idaho Falls to Promontory Point, the Golden Spike, National Historic Park in Utah. And I explained to my children the history of the Chinese participation in the building of the Continental Railroad.
Wow.
And those are important because that's the way I prepare my children for exactly what's happening today. And they are not caught by surprise either. So its purpose is to educate the younger generation and to prepare them. I was in a webinar last week a very good webinar put on by Wheaton College. And in this particular one, a group of young Asian American college students, Christians, were interviewed. And a common theme from these young people were articulate, was that they thought they need to learn more about the past. In order to understand what's happening now, and also how to move forward, deal with future situations like this. And really, one young woman really, impacted me in what she said. Basically, she said, what's happening now. She was expressing a feeling of immense grief.
Yes.
Immense grief, and that really spoke to my heart, because I feel that this country can be so much more, be so much better. But now, our younger generation of Asian Americans are really feeling very grieved, very sad, and somewhat confused by,
Yes.
what's happening.
Well, and like you said, Ricky, racism has been an underlying issue. It's just when these events occur, it seems to magnify that racism. And so it shows us as Christians, I believe, our part we need to do to help heal that, because it has to be a healing process, really, of not just asking forgiveness, but then even working through that. So do you feel, if some feel that standing up for their rights as an Asian, American Asian, can be dangerous, do you feel that way?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, because there are so many facets to it, Vince.
Mm.
Well, let's start with, on a personal level. Uh, uh, to me, when we're confronted with this, these kinds of situations, it's always safety first.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a time
Right.
to be brave, or to be overcome with emotion. And I've been exposed to many of these. Whether it's a dirty look, right, or a racial slur, or something worse. The best self-defense is to ignore it,
Mm.
and
Mm.
just walk away
Mm. Mm.
from a
Okay.
provocation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
but on the flip side, for myself, something that I have to be very careful about. As an Asian American who fortunately had been, grown up in this country, who speaks fairly good English, who
Yep.
who have been around, you know, standing up for my rights, because in this country it's all about your individual rights, right? So I'm kind of a Chinese person with a Western culture, upbringing, and so when I am insulted, sometimes, or feel that I'm being insulted, whether it's true or not, or perceived, or real, sometimes I fall into the trap of doing racial profiling of my own.
Mm-hmm.
I always
Mm-hmm.
say to young people, nobody has, no race has cornered the market on racism, right?
No. No.
Okay.
No.
I'm as guilty, as other people sometimes, and just give you, and I have to be really, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but I have to be really brutally honest here,
Yeah.
and because it happens to me all the time. So I'm
Mm.
driving on the interstate, and a white guy in a Ford pickup truck, drives by me, just zooming past me, and then and then glance over and give me a look, and he's going too fast. I don't really know what the look was, okay. But
Um,
and if he passes by me on the,
mm.
in his bumper, he has, Trump for 2020. Okay,
Mm.
my immediate reaction was, I'm tempted to gun the engine of my car
Yeah. Yeah.
and try to pass him back,
Sure.
and and glance back at him. Um, thank God I usually don't do that. All right,
Right.
because then I will realize that I'm falling into the same you know uh,
Sure.
stereotype that that I really detest.
Yeah.
So but in a 2018 pretty recent study by a political scientist in, I think, the University of Alabama, he found that roughly five, he's a scientist, so it's 5.64%, okay, of America's 198 million non-Hispanic white people, 5.64%. He believes, based on his research, holds views that are consistent with what is called the alt-right, you know,
Mm.
alt-right's worldview. And
Okay.
so yeah, not all of the whites are white supremacists, but
Right.
you're still looking at over 11 million people, so it's out there. But
Yeah. Yeah.
just because of that, we don't want to behave. in the same way. And
Exactly.
also, yeah, and as far as, danger on a societal level, there have been, maybe people don't know about this, activist organization dealing with social justice issues from an Asian American standpoint ever since the late 60s and the early 70s, because really inspired by the Black civil rights movement, and also in 1965, the strict quotas on Asians immigrating to this country in 1965 was lifted. So there were a lot of more immigrants from those areas. And even recently, there's a Christian, Asian American Christian collaborative that had been formed. And these organizations are speaking out, and it's a good thing. So I would say today there is more an emphasis on being in solidarity, the Asian Americans, with other marginalized, ethnic or racial groups than in the past. And we know, you and I know, when Asian Americans or anybody becomes more vocal, there will always be backlashes. That just, fact of life. And the problem I see, one of the problems is that, and I've observed this all the time, is that a moral issue may once again be turned into a political one.
Yeah.
That is something that we have to really be very careful about,
We have to be
because
careful.
I'm seeing this happening all the time.
Yep.
A more, moralistic, or even an issue of faith,
Right.
is made into a political issue to some extent.
That's right. That's right.
And
So
then,
let me ask you, Ricky, you said, we talked about types of racism affecting Asian Americans. Apart from, we just talked about maybe a physical harm, but isn't there also a mental toll on this group as well that could happen with this kind of racism?
definitely. Because Asian Americans right now, they have to deal with health and financial issues. If you go to any, Chinatown in any major city, restaurants, supermarket, grocery businesses, which many Asian Americans, operate and own, are really suffering, even maybe in a higher proportion than other businesses of that type. So that's an added challenge, an added burden when you have to also be concerned about racism or xenophobia at this time. And so you could imagine, it only exacerbates the situation, and it does take a mental toll. So, reports of hate crimes against Asian Americans are increasing now. And so it's important for Asian Americans, under stress, to really, I believe, practice self-care. And, that could mean,
Yes.
staying socially connected.
Right.
With people who understand the situation, seek professional.
Yep. That's good.
Health care, and even read books by, if you could read, English books mostly by Asian Americans, about what they know from their own experience about their situation, and also, pay attention when you feel tensed up or you have knots in your stomach. That's the time you have to be careful and just kind of try to calm down.
Right.
And
right.
So for the young people, as I mentioned before, they don't, because I'm involved very much at the University of Oregon here.
Right.
With the students and the faculty administration. So I could tell you, the younger generation, they don't feel keeping silence is an option anymore.
Yeah.
And quoting Martin Luther King, he wrote from during the civil rights movement from Birmingham, Alabama jail, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Yes.
And that's how young people, they feel this is not just their own battle.
Right.
There's
Right.
many groups are facing the same kind of discrimination. So I think Asian Americans under these circumstances and how we're feeling have to be remind ourselves that this is only we're only a part of a larger story.
Right. That's right.
These xenophobic behaviors are really honestly personally painful.
Yes.
And
Yes.
but they are just reflective of a larger legacy of oppression against Asians and against other minority groups, in the United States.
Yeah. Well, and it's part of our broken world, isn't it? Unfortunately, and I'm always challenged. For example, talking about this issue by Jesus, and one of the great examples I love in the Bible is when he approached the Samaritan woman, which you and I know, in his day was prohibited. Number one, you don't talk to Samaritans, much less a woman. And yet he broke all those barriers. And I think from what you're saying, even the young people, that's what we need to do as Christians, is be that example of justice, of righteousness, of not being afraid. And because, as you just pointed out, racism can be from any angle. You could be the only, white person in some other culture and feel racism. You could be an African American and feel the same. And so it's wrong at any angle, and especially as we look at the American Asians too, we want to help. So what would be, Ricky, for our pastors, our churches out there, what can they do to help our fellow Asian American brothers and sisters with this situation right now that we're going through?
Yeah, I think, I was reading a statement by, I mentioned this collaborative called the Asian American Christian Collaborative, and they, I think at the end of March, they came up with a statement against anti-Asian discrimination during the pandemic, and I think they offer some very good suggestions on how, in general, the fellow American Christians, brothers and sisters, and church pastors could help in this situation. And just give you a little bit of a summary of what they are suggesting. First of all, it's a matter of like you say, how do we imitate Christ?
Right.
In situation like this, and it's really engaging the congregation in kind of a whole life discipleship in the churches, and and embracing and teaching about the work of Jesus, okay, and and actively combating anti-Asian racism from the pulpit,
right,
in some fashion, and secondly, to increase the simply increase the awareness, like what you're doing, interviewing me, and educating the congregation on Asian American issues.
Yes.
The Chinese Exclusion Act, for example, or the Japanese American internment in relocation camps, and that's important. I think education helps to dispel fear, and that's what our enemy, that's what the devil uses more than anything.
Right.
Try to turn one group of people against another, and also, I mentioned about the mental toll. Just maybe provide culturally competent mental health services.
Yes.
At least promote that. I mean, it may not be in their particular churches,
right?
And especially if you have Asian Americans in your churches, especially, talk to them.
Yes.
Because of maybe our culture, sometimes we don't tend to be very vocal. Many of us,
right.
So, I would encourage the pastors and other brothers and
Good.
sisters to kind of reach out, because this whole thing about shame, honor
Right.
is a real thing
It
in
is.
especially, Asian
Yes.
culture.
Yes.
And support, when things open up, go to Chinatown, support
Mhm.
Asian businesses and say,
Sure.
"Hi, we appreciate you and what you're doing." And those things, little, gestures of kindness and generosity goes a long ways. We don't have to really, you know,
That's
do
very true.
big things necessarily, and just being sympathetic. And
Mm.
then lastly, do hold your elected officials
Mm.
accountable
Mm.
for their words and
Yes.
action, or inaction. Let them know that this is not to be tolerated.
Right.
And as your elected representatives, you would expect that
That's
they
good.
act,
That's good.
properly in this situation. And really, to me, uh, there's one question. I read just to close, a book recently by Helen Shaw, XIA, and it's called, An Asian American Dreams, and, she correctly pointed out, and I asked the same question even today, Vince. The one question that Asian Americans continue to ask is, what does it take to become Americans? What does it take
Right.
to become American? I mean,
Oh, wow. Wow.
and I think in our particular culture, or being, in this country, that today is still, still very much,
It is.
on our minds. And really, I like what this Dr. Alan Ye, he's with Biola
Hmm.
University, and I think he puts it quite succinctly. And he said there are two mantras that we can all live by. You are the best advocate of a group. You are the best advocate of Asian American if you are not a part of it. When people like you, Vince, speak up on behalf of Asian Americans, it resonates.
Mm.
It has an impact that
Yeah.
someone like me,
Yeah.
speaking the same thing would not. That's the first thing.
Right.
And then he also said, you are the best critic, of a group if you are a part of it.
Mm.
So because I see Asian Americans, they also,
Yeah.
have racist attitudes, to be honest. So,
Right.
I mean, so I'm the one that, would be in a good position to point that out. Okay. And then he said, avoid reductionism, which means not all individual members of a particular
Right.
race represent that entire race.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
And I know you understand us,
Yes.
and I absolutely appreciate, who you are and what you do, and
Thank you.
thirdly, just recognize the humanity. You
Yeah.
mentioned something about we're all created in an image of God. The
That's right.
humanity of everyone.
That's right.
And he said, finally, learn the history.
Mm.
All we're facing right now is not new.
No.
It's
No.
just the fallenness
Yeah.
of mankind. So.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, Ricky, thank you. This has been awesome. And I do think you've given a lot for our pastors and people to think about and to act upon, I hope, which is my desire for this interview and for this article. So we will do our best. And as we talked, I want to imitate Christ. He was our perfect example. Like I said, he did away with the racism in his day, the labels and the different things, and ministered out of that spirit. And that's what we should imitate. So I do appreciate you taking time, because it helps us understand, and we will continue to work toward that. And I believe not just for the Asian American, but I think also we have to look at racism all through different ethnicities in the United States as well. But God will help us. So you have a great day, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Vince. Appreciate
Bless you.
the opportunity. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Good job.
Okay. Well, I'm sure.
So
you'll
I
get that
will,
anointing.
I'm going to have Lucas do this. So what will happen, Ricky, is, now, this, our message is all online. And what will happen is in the article, we'll put this in the middle and then people can click on it and it, probably go to either Vimeo or YouTube or something. And then hopefully, but I appreciate you guys some really good points and really good information.
Well, thank you. I mean, I need to get that off my chest,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you saw my thing. I still feel also a deep thing for what I saw in Georgia when I was there as a young boy. The racism, I know, is still there, and the truth is, what we're showing here is racism is still alive and well. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter if it's Asian American, African, it's still there. We have to it's time we speak up as a church to deal with it, is what I feel. So ignoring it, putting it under the rug is not going to work. And and another thing here is we got to realize is that's not the most popular thing sometimes. But I think you don't do what's popular, do what's right. So that's the strong point. But when I heard this, and then I forwarded you the Wheaton thing, it's like when I listened to that, I just, I'm going like, are you kidding me? Of all the things that come up, but people, it's when there's sin in your life, or when, even as Christians, we have this issue, you got to deal with it. That's because, we're all looking for scapegoats, but that is no excuse to put down another race just because of where they come from or where you think they come from. It's just, there's no.
Well, I think, this is where I don't think the problem will be solved by anything other than people being reconciled to to God, for one thing.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, you and I know, and I'm really concerned about what I heard Secretary of State Pompeo said yesterday, that he has strong evidence that the virus came out of a laboratory in Wuhan.
Oh boy.
And that the Chinese government have, been giving, disinformation about the severity of what happened. I have a member, he's a young leader in my church, PhD, did his postdoc at Harvard. He works in the biological technology field here. And he's from Wuhan.
Wow.
That's why he's been very, very low key now. When I, try to prod him to get him to talk about what how he feels about,
Well, see, that's the unfortunate thing. I don't know if we ever had I'm going to call it a filter on the media before. I feel there was, or maybe it's just today, your media has so many outlets because of the Wi-Fi, the internet. But I just see a lot of media, not just our politicians, saying things without any basis. And it's so dangerous when you do that, unless you have real proof.
They are not being, and both on the left and right.
Yeah.
They are not being very good journalists. They're just stirring the pot, fanning the
because that just hurts everybody when you give misinformation. So.
But that's where the large segment of the population gets their news, and
I know.
And so I'm expecting, if this keeps on, things are going to get worse than
Well, we pray not, but it could very, very easily. So all right, well, thank you, my friend, appreciate it, and we'll be in touch with you. Okay, God bless you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.